Good afternoon. Welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Jesse Redmond, Head of Investor Relations and Business Development at LEEF Brands. I'm joined today by our CEO, Micah Anderson. Micah, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. And plus, we have our CFO, Kevin Wilson. Kevin, what's happening, man?
Not much. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Excited to chat with both of you today. We're going to discuss the topic today is LEEF Brands enter the New York cannabis market. If you missed the news, you can find the press release on our social media pages at LEEF Brands on X and LinkedIn, or on our website, leafbrands.com. Well, guys, it's been an exciting day, and I know it's been a busy day for both of you doing a couple of different media appearances. So, Micah, let's kick it off with you. I'll pass the mic your direction, and maybe you could start off by giving us a brief overview of today's news.
Yeah, just high level. California's been home base for the company since really the inception of the company, and 2025 is going to be the year that we take a first stab at becoming an MSO. Looking at all the different markets, we decided to start with New York for a handful of different reasons, which I'm sure we'll probably get into. And yeah, we're excited about it. We found a great group to work with out there. I've been working on some supply chain stuff really for the past year leading up to this, and feel like this is hopefully the first of many. Start with New York, prove that we can do it in another market outside of California, and then see where it goes from there.
Hey, Micah, has it always been part of your vision for LEEF to become a multi-state operator, or just more of a response to how the cannabis markets nationwide are evolving?
No, yeah, definitely. That's been the goal, is to move what we do in California, not just in the US. I'd love to see LEEF, the extraction side of what we do in other markets outside of the US as well. We get approached from time to time from different groups, Germany or Australia, or people that are winning licenses and don't necessarily know what they're doing. And so when we originally built our Willits location in California, we built it as a flagship location. So anyone that's ever been there, it looks the part. It's on brand, as we say, and that was done intentionally. We wanted people to be able to come and see what this could potentially look like in their city or county or country.
Great. Well, Kevin, why don't you tell us a little bit about the opportunity in New York and why we selected that as our second state to enter?
Yeah, New York's a pretty exciting market. It had retail sales of roughly, I think it was 160 million in 2023, grew to like a billion in 24, and that's projected to go up to 1.5, 1.6 billion in 2025. I think that the state's done a lot to kind of, I don't know if anyone's been to Manhattan lately, but it's different than it was 12 months ago or 24 months ago when we first started kind of going out there and looking at it. So that's exciting. It's also exciting that a lot of our brand partners are already out there or planning to go out there as well. So a lot of the top brands that we work with in California are in these other states like New York, and being able to go out there and help service their needs already. We have built-in sales already. So yeah, we're excited about New York. 55% of those sales referenced earlier are in the concentrate market and in our swim lane. And so I think we can go out there and be pretty impactful.
And Kevin, when we think about the concentrate market and the categories that fall in it, it seems like that's evolving and maybe broadly growing. So sometimes when we talk about concentrates, we think of things like jars of live resin or jars of rosin designed for dabbing, and that certainly is part of the market. But when we talk about concentrates that LEEF makes and the way we can participate in these categories, that's much bigger, right? Like we're getting into things like vapes, we're getting into things like edibles, beverages, tinctures. There's a number of different ways concentrates are being used today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we, like you said, we make a lot of bulk concentrates, whether it's distillate oil, whether it's through our hydrocarbon line, and a lot of that goes into things like various vape pens and edibles and drinks, which are obviously a growing segment. So yeah, we're able to service a lot of those needs for various products. It's not just dabbables or anything like that.
And it seems like this is an area where the trend is our friend and the wind is at our back, and whatever other cliche or metaphor you can sneak in there, meaning that the younger generation, like the older heads like myself, being I think a 50-year-old and the oldest member of this group, but you guys are close enough to my age. Like we grew up, smoking flower if we were using cannabis. Maybe once in a while somebody made some ridiculous homemade brownies, but we didn't have things like vape pens. We didn't have things like regulated edibles, and beverages weren't even something that I even considered cannabis being a part of. So it's exciting to me that not only is 55% of the New York market using concentrates, but it seems like driven by adoption by the younger generations that may in fact increase over time.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, you're not wrong. I haven't really looked at the data in that way, but yeah, you're definitely not wrong. When we look at California, it's closer to 50%, 49 or 51%.
Mm-hmm.
And so just even having that little bit higher ratio, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Michael, let's go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to add to that thought because I agree with you. I think that we're still, cannabis in general is early years and the adoption and also the innovation that comes around products. So I think that's one of the cool things about concentrates is that if you think of it in the context of alcohol, right? When we came out of prohibition, you had moonshine and things that were just high potency, and then fast forward to where we are today, you've got all these different types of spirits and wines and flavors, and cannabis is going to do the same thing. And I think concentrates will play a large role in that, different types of products made for different types of uses.
Yet it seems like if there's a way I think about the trend, it's that people like convenience and discretion these days, where people like to be able to medicate with something on the road. Like there's the joke about somebody hitting their vape pen, at Walmart or in the line at Target, or even see people using those on pens. Edibles are increasingly popular. On our podcast, Higher Exchanges, we've been talking more about the beverage category, but it seems like convenience and discretion are what the younger generation likes.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Michael, let's talk about how we're going to make this move to New York or transition to enter the New York market. Explain to us, how does LEEF replicate its success in California in a new market like New York?
Yeah, I think the idea is pretty straightforward. It's to go in and stick to our lane and do what we do in California and try and do it with the same group, or at least in the beginning, as the same group of clients that we work with in California. Most of them are already in New York or they want to go to New York. And so to keep it simple, for ourselves is like, okay, great. Let's leverage those relationships. Let's take advantage of the fact that we've got a lot of equipment that we're 8-9 years into this in California, right? And over the years, we've put together a boneyard of old equipment that we've upgraded over time. And with the size of the New York market being substantially smaller than California is at the moment, I think that changes over time. It's a quick, easy way for us to send out equipment that we already own, which we've already done, and plug it right into this new location. So we're signing a lease on a 7,000 square foot building, a group that has a 1,500 acre ranch. They're honestly kind of similar to what we're doing in California. We've got our ranch. They've got their same interests that we have, and they've got some cultivation going on. So we'll do an offtake agreement with these guys, and then start working on either partnering or acquiring. It's kind of a TBD, but like putting together the same exact structure that we have in California, where we've got a large cultivation site that runs into our extraction facility, and then it goes out to the same group of clients. And so same SOPs, a lot of the same genetics. Hopefully I answered your question.
No, that's good. Let's unpack it a little bit for people that may not understand our business model as well. So Micah, our process starts where we need material to extract. And so we're going to start growing that ourselves this year at Salisbury Canyon Ranch, but we can also source and we'll continue to source material for other people. So you talked about having a partnership with one farm where we can get material from them, and then we can also source other material in the open market. So that's step one, is we're going to acquire material, and we've done some work there. Step two is that we need a place to run that material, and we needed equipment. You talked about the equipment that we have in place that we've already shipped out from California. Could you talk a little bit about the facility that we have in New York?
Yeah, so it's a 7,000 square foot standalone building. It's on the same ranch as some of the cultivation is at. We've got a couple different pods that we've sent out, one of them being a hydrocarbon pod, which will be one of our extraction lines, the other being a solventless pod. And so we'll just slide those in and into this facility. We'll rely on other cultivators for the first year that we're in operation. And then over time, I definitely kind of see us probably just either through partnerships or ownership, we'll move into a larger footprint of cultivation. I think that one of the secrets to success being in an extraction company when you're moving into new markets is making sure that you've got your supply chain really in order and you know who you're going to be working with. That's one of the things I've seen in California over the years is like groups that pop up. They don't really put a ton of effort or enough effort or thought process into that. It takes a lot of material to end up with concentrated products. Acres of material reduces down into jars. And so it's establishing those relationships, which, like I said, we've been doing a pretty good job of doing that ahead of time. For the past year, we've been going out and attending all the events and getting to know kind of who's who in the market. There's been a lot of cultivators and brands, but cultivators that have left California over the past few years when New York transitioned from their hemp program into their cannabis program. There's a lot of guys that were here that were either from the East Coast or they got picked up by East Coast companies that are now out there. And so it's been good for us. We've been leveraging some of those longstanding relationships that we've had in California.
And then the last phase is that we're going to create extracts. We can make distillate there. We can make cured resins. We can make live resins. That's from the hydrocarbon system. And then on the solventless side, we can make things like live rosin and other forms of rosin that could be used for dabbing, could be used in vapes, can be used in edibles. And ultimately, Micah, we need to sell those products, which is a non-trivial part of it. Like every single stage of this matters, right? You need great material to run because, I always say it's like FIFO, fire in, fire out, right? You've got to have good material to get a good extract. So that's step one. Number two is you've got to be great at the extraction part. And thankfully, we have a decade plus of experience in that. But the last part, not to be overlooked, is you need to generate the revenue, which you make by selling the product. And you touched on this earlier, but let's just revisit it one more time, which is that we have existing relationships with top California brands that are also in New York. And so I'll leave it up to you if it's appropriate to name names or not, but think about the largest edible brands in California. Most of those are our clients. Think about the largest vape brands in California. Most of those are our clients. And several of those companies are also in New York, which will make selling the products that we produce easier.
Yeah. I mean, well said. I'll leave names off of it, but yeah, that's the idea. And we're already having those conversations with the groups. Mostly for the guys that have been in the New York market for a while, they're struggling. There's a real demand on the supply chain side of things, and there's a demand for hydrocarbon products. There's not enough in California. We call it a Type 7, but it's a hydrocarbon line in the market. And so that's where we think that there's a real, strategic advantage for ourselves. We go in and focus on that at first, focus on, solventless products, keep our menu probably a bit more condensed and targeted than what we do in California. In California, we do every array of every fraction you can think of, and it'll be a bit more condensed. And yeah, have these conversations with these groups that are either there and struggling with the supply chain partners that they have, or groups that are wanting to move into that market and need someone that they can rely on. Those are the conversations that we're having in New York. And I think that that's a smart way for not only LEEF to move into new markets, but also our brand partners as well. Rather than get off to a rocky start, it's like, how do we all kind of group together and move into markets together?
And a Type 7 in California, Micah, that's the equivalent to a Type 1 in New York. Is that correct? That's the broadest license. Am I accurate on that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And that'll allow us to do the hydrocarbon, to do the solventless. But my understanding, Micah, is in New York, there's a bit of a shortage specifically on the hydrocarbon side, which is what's used for things like live resin and cured resins.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. From what we've seen so far is that there's very few hydrocarbon setups, and the ones that are there are pretty small. So there's a huge demand for these types of products.
And do you see that the output from those being inferior to what we're able to do in California? Meaning, Micah, you've been in California cannabis for over 20 years, but just with the experience that LEEF has over the last decade or so, are you optimistic that we can make a difference by producing superior products based on the experience that we have competing in California, which is, the largest and most competitive cannabis market?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've got a bit of an advantage, the fact that we've been doing this for a very long time in California. I think, sure. And I don't mean that in like an egotistical way. I just think that people that are new to it are going to have a harder time putting out good products consistently. That's one of the other challenging things to do. So I think that, yeah, we've got an advantage there for sure as we move into a market, and we've been doing it for as long as we have.
And so, Kevin, let's jump into the financial impact and talk about the numbers a little bit. Can you walk us through how big this opportunity might be for LEEF?
Yeah. I mean, the New York market is, we said if they do 1.5 billion next year, they did $1 billion in 2024. I think California did 4.5 billion for reference in 2024, somewhere in that range. And so it is a smaller market that's going to continue to grow. And we're going to step into it in a smaller way as well, right? We're shipping out our boneyard, as Micah called it. A lot of good extraction equipment that we've upgraded at our facility, and so we're going to have less output in New York and ease into it. That said, pricing is dynamically different in that market, both input pricing and outputs. And I think that there's going to be an opportunity to obviously grow top line revenue through this strategy. And an opportunity to grow margin. I think, again, it's all relative. Inputs are up, pricing is up, right? I think where LEEF starts to win is taking our decade of experience and extracting the right material the right way, really maximizing yields in this new market based on our California experiences. And that's going to allow us to recognize some higher margins in the space. Bring in some new products, as you kind of said. So I think hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, that's great. And I think your point about higher input costs, higher prices for our extracts as well. But we're very conscious that these markets evolve over time, right? So
Yeah.
I was looking at some menus the other day, and I saw on a Curaleaf menu, jars of live resin there were, 50, 60, up to close to $70. That's a little more than twice the California market. So somebody could look at that and think that it's going to be, insanely profitable, and it may be, a better margin market than California, but we do have to account for that our input costs will be higher, and over time, we expect the input costs, so the cost of production will likely go down as there's more material available. And then also as the market becomes more competitive, we expect prices
Absolutely.
of the concentrates to come down as well.
New York did a good job, or a better job, of a lot of states, including California, at issuing cultivation licenses, not really flooding the market. And so they have a tighter supply chain for sure. And yeah, that's going to, result in increased input costs to a company like LEEF if you're not cultivating, and is why, a jar is $70, as you said. So, that'll evolve, that'll change. More licenses will be issued over time, just like in every other market. But yeah, we'll hopefully be coming in on the early stages of it and participating in that change, as opposed to coming in on the tail end of it.
And I like that we're taking what I would call an asset light approach to this, Kevin, and that we are fortunate where we have a bunch of equipment that we were not currently using in California that we could move out there. We have the facility in place. Can you just talk a little bit about even what that means to be asset light and how this applies to this situation?
Yeah. We could go and try to raise a bunch of money and build a huge facility like we did in California. And, Mike said it off the top, we built California to be a beacon for the company and for groups to want to come and work with us. And that's been very successful. We don't want to go and spend tens of millions of dollars building out a facility in another state. We want to be able to scale into that state using the expertise and the machines and equipment that we currently have. And so, yeah, there's a little bit of cost associated with, shipping and setting everything up again and all that, but we don't need to go out and buy hundreds of thousands of dollars of new extraction equipment, which is nice. And then hopefully we can, replicate it and do the same thing. We invest in New York, we grow into New York, and we take that equipment and we move over to name the next state. That's hopefully the goal.
Yeah.
And let's talk about, when the deal might close, Kevin, and when do you think we might start booking revenue out of New York?
Yeah. We are working with the partner we're acquiring the license from, and the OCM, the cannabis control office in New York. So a little bit at the mercy of government. It could take 60 days, it could take 6 months. We're more optimistic on the 60-day front. We have a great partner who's been working with the OCM to get this pushed through. We're hopeful that if the license were to be issued sooner than later, that we're plugged in 30 to 45 days after that. As Micah said, it really is a modular setup. So it's like everything's, just for oversimplification, everything's prefabbed in a shipping container. You slide it in, you press go. And so when we get to that stage, we're going to be able to start producing material quicker than most. And hopefully that means that we're operational and booking revenue in Q2.
Great. And so, Micah, let's close by talking about what might be next. It's already been an exciting year for us. We had the press release, I think it was last week, about the increases in our extraction capacity. I think it was 66% on the ethanol. I'm going to screw it up, guys. I'm going to stop saying that. It was about 50% on average across the different lines. And so that was one exciting thing, is that we're going to be able to produce more concentrates in California across all 3 lines. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about entering New York. Soon we'll be talking about planting Salisbury Canyon Ranch this spring. Then we also have that 4th pillar of growth, which is our Bitcoin treasury strategy. Mm-hmm. But focusing on where we are today, Mike, in terms of this expanding to new states, I asked you at the top if you always thought LEEF was going to be in MSO and be outside of California, and you said yes. And so I'm guessing that if I were to ask you, do you think we'll be beyond New York and California, your answer would also be yes. So maybe you could talk about what you see as a reasonable pace of that expansion and what we're looking for when we evaluate new states to move into.
Yeah, I think you're right. The answer is yes. I definitely would like to see us in more states. How many is I don't know at the moment. I think a lot of that comes down to like what happens at the federal level. If anything happens there over the next 2-3 years. As far as the cadence, how often are we going to do this? We're gonna enter New York. We're gonna do our best job of being successful in New York, and come Q4 of the year, I'm guess we'll start to look at other markets. We're already having conversations with different groups in different states, and I think if was like a real honest answer to that is I don't know, but I think that to do more than one a year would probably be too much. I want to make sure that we're successful. We've got a great management team in Northern California, some of which the guys that are raising their hand, they want to move out to the new state. So we'll be able to do it relatively quickly from like a training and management perspective. But you still got to build a team, and we're going to enter New York in a kind of a tiptoe fashion. We've got older equipment. We know that we're not going to go in and do the numbers or extract the numbers that we do in California. We also think that we can finance the business ourselves as we do start to grow bigger. To Kevin's point a moment ago, it's like once we do move into a new market, come 26, I think that we should be in a position to where it's like, okay, let's do the upgrade on the equipment in New York, take that equipment and then move it into wherever the next market is. And then I'd say, to answer your question on like when we're looking at different states and where do you want to go, pretty short list of things that we look at. I think number one is like, do we have any existing relationships there on the sales side? Do we have clients that are there or want to go there? Start with that. What does the supply chain look like? Is there outdoor, like, can we mimic or replicate what we do in California and in this other market? New York, we can. Certain markets, I'd say not so much. They've got large indoor facilities, but that doesn't necessarily do enough for what our business does on the concentrate side. Is it limit licenses? And then you get into kind of more of the, I don't know, less important things to look at, but those are really the main 2 things that we look at. What do the laws allow for? I guess would be right up there at the top. Can we do hydrocarbon extraction? If that's a big focus point of our business, let's not move into a market where we can only do, solventless production. So, yeah. That's... And
it's also maybe a little bit hard to look too far out, Micah, because if we look long enough, we expect to have interstate commerce. I mean, you don't only drink New York wines in New York, right? They actually do have some good New York wines, I'm told. But I'm guessing if you went to a restaurant, you see a lot of wines from California, and even international, like France, for example. Same thing for strawberries, grapes, and everything else around the world. Maybe cannabis is the only thing I can think of off the top of my head that doesn't have interstate commerce. And while we don't build our business around an expectation that's going to happen anytime soon, because politics are super hard to predict, and it gets even harder with really big things like potentially federal legalization and interstate commerce. However, that is something we often talk about, Micah, as being a call option that we have, that LEEF Brands has a call option on eventual federal reform. Can you talk about a little bit about how under that interstate commerce scenario, how that might impact the business?
Yeah, I mean, that would be wild if that was to happen, and it would be a huge win for us being in California and having the footprint that we have in California. So I guess if you were to wave a magic wand, interstate commerce is now allowed. You're going to have other states kind of scrambling to put infrastructure in place. There's a book that I've read that I really like. Anyone that's interested in this kind of stuff should take a look at it. It's a very dry read, but it's good for predicting the future of what cannabis could potentially look like. It's called Toward Liquor Control. Man, I have it on my bookshelf out there. I hope I got that right. It's basically how the blueprint of how they took alcohol from through prohibition into, they amended the Constitution, and then all the different states, how they acted and what they did. And so I think that long-winded way of answering your question, if that was to happen, LEEF's in a really great position. We've got 187 acres worth of cannabis permit. We think that we can expand upon that on the existing footprint of the ranch that we have. We've got good relationships with other large cultivators in the state. So if we needed to start adding on even more acreage, what sounds crazy now, I think in the near future isn't going to be so crazy. It's going to be, 187 acres is going to be a freckle in the grand scheme of things. No different than any other agricultural business in the world. If you were a carrot guy or a tomatoes and you talked about your 180 acres as being the biggest thing in the breadbasket of the world, that would be nothing. It's tiny, right? So we would be in a good position because you got states that wouldn't have the infrastructure set up. We'd be able to move our bulk concentrates into these new markets. I think that pricing would absolutely jump for a moment in time. I don't think that lasts forever. I think that depending on which ways the feds wrote the laws, we would have this moment in time when we're in a good position just because of our size. Pricing would go up, our P&L would look amazing for however long that lasted. And, hopefully we were in a good spot to then line up some bigger strategic conversations with people that were, interested in what we were doing.
It's also a good reason why you wouldn't want to go build $10 million facilities in every state just because they start to become redundant when you're shipping. I mean, with concentrates, those are going to be able to ship when we get legalization in interstate commerce, much easier than, flour is going to be able to ship across. So.
Right.
Yeah, people not familiar with our business, we have this ranch called Salisbury Canyon Ranch, which is 2,000 acres. We have the largest land use permit in Santa Barbara County for 187 acres of cannabis. We can also have a permit for 100 acres of hemp with the potential to expand both over time. So when you combine that with our state-of-the-art extraction facility, which is in Willits, California, up in Mendocino County, it gives us, tremendous potential both in the California market today, and then as we talked about, when things evolve over time and we eventually get to interstate commerce, which again, to be clear, isn't something that we build our business around, but it is something that we do keep in mind strategically. As we're making decisions, there's a lot of potential to, expand that farm further. We could build out the facility in Mendocino even further. And we know there's going to be a lot of demand for California concentrates. We know that from the way the black market works, right? Like I have friends in California that love to get, products or in Florida rather, that love to get products, from California. And you see California brands all around the country. So we know the demand side will be there. We have the extraction expertise, that we also have this beautiful 2,000 acre ranch with a big permit today that can get even bigger. So, when I think about it, and this isn't just me touting the company I love that I work for, LEEF Brands, but just kind of looking objectively, I don't know if there's another business, maybe Glass House is similar, that's as well situated for eventual interstate commerce.
It's exciting times.
Well said, Jesse. Well said.
Well, thank you guys. Well, why don't we wrap things up here? This has been a super exciting day. I know it's been a long day for everyone. I was up at 4:30 making sure the press release went out and everything was set up properly for that. So been a long day for all of us. I appreciate you guys taking the time. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll talk to you guys again soon.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. See ya. Bye.